The grand palace of the Sci-Fi Dominion stood tall against the alien sky, its glowing towers stretching high into the clouds. Ethan Carter, a human diplomat, stepped out of his sleek transport ship, adjusting the collar of his uniform. The air was thick with tension. It wasn't every day that a human was invited into the heart of the Sci-Fi Empire, especially not for a meeting with Queen Salvera herself. The palace guards, towering alien warriors with shimmering blue skin and piercing golden eyes, watched him closely. Their armor hummed with hidden energy, and their sharp, clawed hands rested on their weapons. Ethan forced himself to stay calm. He had been in tense diplomatic meetings before, but this felt different. He was alone, deep in alien territory, and he had no idea why the Queen had summoned him. A royal attendant, dressed in flowing golden robes, approached. "Human diplomat, follow me. The Queen is waiting." Ethan nodded and walked behind the attendant through the massive halls. The palace was unlike anything he had ever seen. Walls made of crystal-like material that pulsed with soft light, floating platforms that carried Sci-Fi nobles from one floor to another, and murals depicting great battles of the past. He noticed the way the alien courtiers whispered to one another, their eyes filled with curiosity and something else, unease. Finally, the attendant led him into a grand chamber. At the far end, sitting on an ornate throne, was Queen Salvera. She was tall, elegant, and undeniably powerful. Her deep violet skin shimmered under the soft lights, and glowing markings ran across her arms and neck like living constellations. Her piercing silver eyes locked onto Ethan the moment he entered. "Human," she said, her voice smooth yet commanding. "We meet again." Ethan bowed slightly. "Your Majesty, it's an honor to be invited." Salvera studied him for a moment before speaking again. "You must be wondering why I called you here." Ethan nodded. "I assumed it was about our last negotiation. I wasn't expecting a personal audience." A small smile touched the Queen's lips, but there was something behind it. A secret, a hidden truth. "You are here," she said slowly, "because you have done something unexpected." Ethan frowned. "I don't understand." The Queen leaned forward slightly, her silver eyes glowing brighter. "Do you remember our last meeting? The peace talks on Sci-Fi Prime 6 months ago?" "Yes," Ethan replied. "I was part of the human delegation. You and I only spoke briefly." Salvera nodded. "During that meeting, we exchanged formal gestures. A handshake." Ethan raised an eyebrow. "Yes, that's standard in human diplomacy." The Queen's expression turned serious. "For humans, perhaps, but for Zifar Queens, it is different. Our biology is unique. A simple touch, under the right conditions, can trigger a genetic fusion process." Ethan's heart skipped a beat. "Wait, are you saying?" Salvera stood up from her throne, stepping closer to him. The room was silent. Even the guards seemed to be holding their breath. "I am saying," the Queen said softly, "that I am carrying a child, and it is yours." Ethan felt like the floor had vanished beneath his feet. He struggled to process her words. It had to be a mistake, a misunderstanding. "That's impossible," he said. "We've never—" "Our species reproduce differently," Salvera interrupted. "Sci-Fi Queens do not require traditional reproduction. A compatible genetic donor is enough. And somehow, your DNA was a match." Ethan ran a hand through his hair. "This can't be real." But then he saw something he hadn't noticed before. A soft glow beneath the Queen's robes, coming from her abdomen. Sci-Fi Queens carry their offspring within energy cocoons, and now, that glow pulsed steadily, like a heartbeat. Ethan took a shaky breath. "And the child, it's part human." Salvera nodded. "Yes, the first of its kind." Silence filled the chamber. Ethan looked around, noticing the tension in the guards, the nervous glances of the royal advisors. Not everyone was happy about this. "What does this mean?" he asked finally. Salvera's expression softened. "It means change. It means danger. There are those who will see this child as a threat to our traditions. Some will want it destroyed. Ethan's chest tightened. He had come here as a diplomat. Now he was being told that he was a father to a child he had never expected, with an alien queen in an empire that might not even accept it. "What do you want from me?" he asked. Zalvera stepped even closer, her voice softer now. "I want you to understand that this child is our future, and I need you to help me protect it." Ethan looked into her silver eyes, feeling the weight of the moment. He had come here expecting politics. Instead, he had been thrown into something far greater. The first human Sci-Fi hybrid. An unborn child that could unite or destroy an empire. And he was at the center of it all. Ethan stood frozen, his mind struggling to keep up with what he had just heard. A child. His child. With an alien queen. It sounded impossible, yet the glow beneath Zalvera's robes told him otherwise. He took a deep breath, forcing himself to stay calm. "You're saying the Sci-Fi people might not accept this child?" Zalvera nodded. "Many will see this as an abomination. A human and a Sci-Fi queen should not be able to create life together. It defies everything they believe." Ethan rubbed his temples. He had come here expecting another diplomatic negotiation, not an intergalactic scandal. "Then why tell me? If this is so dangerous, why not keep it a secret?" The queen's silver eyes softened. "Because you deserve to know the truth. And because I do not wish to hide my child." Her voice held strength, but there was also something else, a trace of fear. Ethan glanced at the guards. They remained still, but he could sense their unease. Even now, they were likely questioning their queen's decision. "What happens next?" he asked. Zalvera turned toward the grand window behind her throne. Outside, the capital city of Sci-Fi Prime stretched for miles, its towering structures glowing under the twin moons. "Word will spread soon," she said. "There are those in my court who will not accept this. Some will demand I end the pregnancy. Others will see it as a sign of weakness." She paused, then added in a quieter voice, "And there are those who will see the child as a threat to their power." Ethan clenched his fists. "You're saying someone might try to harm the child?" The Zalvera looked at him, her expression unreadable. "Not just the child. Me. And now, you." The weight of her words hit him like a punch. This wasn't just about an unexpected child. This was about survival. Before Ethan could respond, a loud chime echoed through the chamber. The doors swung open, and a Sci-Fi noble entered. His deep red robes signified high status, and his sharp golden eyes locked onto Zalvera with clear disapproval. "Your Majesty," he said, his voice cold and formal. "Is it true? The rumors say you carry a child. A human's child." Zalvera did not flinch. "Yes, Lord Varric. It is true." Murmurs rose from the royal advisors standing nearby. Ethan could feel the tension in the air. Lord Varric took a step closer. "This is a mistake," he said firmly. "The Sci-Fi Dominion has stood for centuries, pure and strong. A half-human heir, it will bring nothing but chaos." Zalvera's eyes flashed with defiance. "You forget your place, Varric. I am queen, and this is my child." Varric's expression darkened. "And what of the people? Do you believe they will simply accept this?" Ethan stepped forward. "Maybe they should," he said. "Maybe this child is exactly what your people need. A bridge between our species. A future beyond war." Varric's gaze snapped to him, filled with barely concealed contempt. "And who are you to decide what our people need, human?" Ethan met his stare without hesitation. The father of the child. A heavy silence fell over the room. Even the guards seemed shocked. The Zalvera lifted her chin. "This is not up for debate. The child will be born. And any who challenge this, challenge me." Varric's jaw tightened, but he bowed stiffly. "As you wish, Your Majesty. But know this, not everyone will accept your decision." With that, he turned and left the chamber. Ethan exhaled slowly. He's going to be a problem, isn't he? Zalvera's lips pressed into a thin line. He already is. Ethan ran a hand through his hair. Then we don't have much time. If there are people who want to stop this, we need to be ready. The Queen studied him for a moment, then gave a small nod. You understand the danger now. Yet, you do not turn away. Ethan gave a small, determined smile. I've faced danger before, but I won't walk away from my child. For the first time since he had arrived, Zalvera's expression softened. Then we stand together. As the twin moons shone brightly over the Sci-Fi capital, Ethan knew one thing for certain. His life had changed forever. And the battle for his child's future had only just begun. Ethan had been in dangerous situations before, but this was different. He wasn't just fighting for himself, he was fighting for his child. The moment he had stepped forward and claimed his role as the father, he knew he had made enemies, powerful ones. As he walked beside Zalvera through the grand corridors of the palace, he could feel the eyes of the Sci-Fi nobles on him. Whispers followed their every step. Some of the alien advisors watched with curiosity, others with thinly veiled hostility. They won't say anything in front of me, Zalvera murmured, keeping her voice low. But behind closed doors, they will scheme. Ethan glanced at her. You think Varric is already planning something? The Queen's silver eyes darkened. I know he is. They reached the royal chamber, a vast, circular room with a domed ceiling that displayed a holographic map of the Sci-Fi Dominion. The walls were lined with glowing symbols, the ancient language of her people. Waiting inside was Zalvera's most trusted guard, Commander Raylis. The tall, armored warrior had been silent earlier, but now he stepped forward and saluted. My queen, Raylis said in a firm voice, we have intercepted a message from Varric's estate. He is summoning supporters, loyalists who believe your child is a threat. Ethan clenched his fists. So it begins. Zalvera remained calm. How many? Not enough to challenge your rule directly, Raylis admitted, but enough to cause trouble. Ethan exhaled sharply. This isn't just about politics, is it? If they fear the child, they might try to. He didn't finish the sentence. He didn't have to. The meaning was clear. Zalvera's expression hardened. They would not dare. Raylis hesitated. Desperation can make people do foolish things, my queen. Ethan took a step closer. Then we need to be ahead of them. We need to know what they're planning. Zalvera nodded. Agreed. We will strengthen the palace defenses, and I will send a message to the people. Raylis tilted his head. A message. The Queen's voice was steady. I will announce the child to the entire Dominion. Ethan's eyes widened. You sure that's a good idea? Zalvera's silver eyes met his. If we try to keep it a secret, it will only make us look weak. We must show that we are not afraid, that this child is not something to be hidden in the shadows. Raylis nodded approvingly. A bold move, my queen. But it will force your enemies to act sooner. Zalvera exhaled. Then let them act. We will be ready. The gathering storm. That night, the Queen's message was sent across the Dominion. Holographic broadcasts displayed her standing tall, dressed in her royal attire, her silver gaze unwavering. To my people, she began, I bring you news that will shape our future. I, Queen Zalvera of the Sci-Fi Dominion, carry a child born not just of Sci-Fi blood, but also of human blood. Gasps and murmurs filled the crowds across the capital as they watched the transmission. Some were stunned, others outraged. As Zalvera continued, her voice firm. This child is not a threat. It is a symbol, a bridge between our species, a step toward something greater than war and division. Ethan watched from the palace balcony as the transmission played across the glowing skyline. He could almost feel the tension in the city. She's right to do this, he muttered. But it's only going to make our enemies act faster. A shadow moved behind him. Ethan turned, instincts kicking in. A hooded figure lunged at him, a blade flashing in the moonlight. Ethan dodged, barely avoiding the deadly strike. The assassin moved fast, too fast. The blade swiped again, this time cutting through the edge of Ethan's jacket. He reacted on pure survival instinct, grabbing the assassin's wrist and twisting it hard. The attacker let out a sharp grunt but didn't drop the weapon. The palace guards rushed in, weapons raised. The assassin spun and vanished into the darkness, moving like a ghost. "Stop him!" one of the guards shouted. They chased after the figure, but it was too late. The assassin had disappeared into the night. Ethan's heart pounded. He turned to see Xalvera standing at the doorway, eyes wide with alarm. "They just tried to kill me," Ethan said, breathing heavily. "This isn't just politics anymore." Xalvera clenched her fists. They are afraid of change, and afraid of what this child represents. Raylis appeared beside her, his face grim. "My queen, we must assume there will be more attempts." Ethan straightened. "Then we need to find out who sent that assassin." Raylis nodded. "I will begin an investigation immediately." Xalvera placed a hand on her stomach, a rare moment of vulnerability crossing her face. "They will not stop," she whispered. "Not until they know this child is no longer a threat." Ethan stepped closer, his voice firm. "Then we make sure they never get the chance." The battle for the child's future had begun, and Ethan wasn't going to let anyone take away what was his. Ethan couldn't sleep. His heart still pounded from the attack. Someone had just tried to kill him, and worse, they wouldn't stop until they succeeded. He stood on the palace balcony, looking over the glowing city of Sci-Fi, the capital of the Zyphar Dominion. The Queen's announcement had shaken the entire empire. A human fathering the heir to the throne. Many had accepted it. Many had not. And among those who refused to accept it were people willing to kill to stop it. Footsteps approached from behind. Ethan turned, expecting Xalvera, but it was Raylis, the Queen's most trusted guard. "I have news," Raylis said. His voice was low, serious. "We found the assassin's escape route." Ethan's body tensed. "Where?" Raylis led him inside to the security chamber. A holographic map floated above the table, displaying the palace and its surroundings. He pointed to a narrow tunnel leading out of the palace gardens. "This passage," Raylis explained, "was used for centuries as an escape route for royalty. It was sealed years ago, or so we thought." Ethan frowned. "So someone inside the palace reopened it." Raylis nodded. "That means we have a traitor." Xalvera entered the room, her silver eyes sharp. She had been listening. "We need to act fast," she said. "If there is a traitor in the palace, they will try again." Ethan folded his arms. "Then we need to find them before they find us." The hunt begins. The search began immediately. Palace guards combed the halls, questioning servants, checking security footage, and searching for anything unusual. Ethan joined the investigation. He wasn't just going to sit back and wait for another attack. He followed Raylis into the lower levels of the palace, where the hidden passage had been discovered. The tunnel was dark and narrow, the air damp. Ethan shined a small flashlight ahead as they walked carefully through the space. The walls were lined with ancient Zyphar markings, a reminder of the kingdom's long history. Then Raylis stopped. "Here." He pointed to the ground. There were footprints in the dust. Someone had come through recently. Ethan crouched, examining them. The prints were deep, meaning the person had been carrying something heavy or wearing armor. "This wasn't just an assassin," Ethan muttered. "This was a trained warrior." Raylis nodded. "And that means someone powerful sent them." They followed the tracks until they reached the end of the tunnel. The exit led out into the city, hidden behind an abandoned marketplace. The scent of burning oils and alien spices filled the air. Outside, the city was alive, unaware of the danger lurking in the shadows. "We lost them," Ethan said in frustration. Raylis placed a hand on his weapon. Not necessarily. He pointed to a symbol carved into the wall near the exit. It was a marking, one that Ethan didn't recognize, but Raylis clearly did. His expression darkened. "This belongs to the Shadow Hand," he said. "An underground group that operates outside the law. They take contracts from anyone with the right amount of money." Ethan narrowed his eyes. "So someone paid them to eliminate me." Raylis exhaled. "Not just you. If they were hired, it means the child is the real target." Ethan's jaw clenched. His child was in danger, and he wasn't going to let anyone take them away. The confrontation. Ethan and Raylis returned to the palace immediately. They had a name now, the Shadow Hand, and that meant they had a lead. Inside the throne room, Salvera was already waiting, her expression unreadable. She had spent years ruling a powerful empire, but now she was facing a war within her own walls. "We know who sent the assassin," Raylis informed her. Salvera's gaze sharpened. "Who?" Raylis hesitated. "The Shadow Hand." The queen's fingers tightened around the armrest of her throne. "Then I know who hired them." Ethan leaned forward. "Varric." Salvera nodded. "He has always feared change. He would do anything to keep the bloodline pure." Ethan clenched his fists. "Then it's time we paid him a visit." Into the lion's den. That night, Ethan and Raylis prepared for a mission. To confront Varric himself. "We can't just walk in and accuse him," Raylis warned. "He's powerful, and he still has supporters." Ethan smirked. "Who said anything about walking in?" With the help of Salvera's most trusted spies, they infiltrated Varric's private estate. The building was heavily guarded, but Ethan had experience in stealth. He moved like a shadow, slipping past patrols, staying hidden in the darkness. Inside, they reached Varric's private chamber. The noble was standing near a balcony, looking out at the city. He didn't even flinch when they entered. "I was expecting you," Varric said calmly. He turned, his reptilian features emotionless. "I assume you're here to accuse me." Ethan didn't waste time. "We know you hired the Shadow Hand." Varric smirked. "And do you have proof?" Raylis stepped forward. "Not yet, but we will." Varric sighed. "You misunderstand, humans. This isn't about you. This is about preserving our people. You don't belong here. That child is a mistake." Ethan's blood boiled. "That child is my family." Varric's smirk faded. "Then you're a fool." Before Ethan could react, Varric clapped his hands. Guards stormed into the room. Ethan grabbed his weapon, but Raylis shouted, "We're outnumbered." Varric laughed coldly. "You should have stayed in your place, human." Ethan gritted his teeth. He wasn't going to die here. And he wasn't going to let Varric win. Ethan's heart pounded as armed guards closed in. The air was thick with tension. They were trapped. Varric stood with a smug smile. "You should have stayed out of this, human." Ethan clenched his fists. "Yeah, and you should have learned that humans don't back down." The first guard lunged. Ethan reacted fast, sidestepping and slamming his elbow into the guard's ribs. The alien grunted, but before he could recover, Raylis spun behind him, knocking him unconscious with a single strike. The other guards charged. Ethan grabbed a fallen weapon and fired. Blue energy bolts streaked through the air. Raylis moved with the precision of a warrior, disarming enemies and using their own momentum against them. Varric's smirk turned to a frown. "Useless fools," he muttered. Then he turned and ran toward a hidden passage behind his throne. Ethan saw him move. Not so fast. Varric disappeared into the secret tunnel. Ethan sprinted after him. The chase through the tunnels. The hidden passage was dark and narrow, with only the dim glow of energy lights along the walls. Ethan ran, his breath heavy, his muscles burning. He couldn't let Varric escape, not after what he had done. The noble moved fast for his age, his robes flowing as he turned sharp corners. Ethan pushed harder, gaining on him. Finally, They burst out into an underground hangar. A sleek, black hovercraft was waiting. Varric's personal getaway. Ethan didn't hesitate. He leaped forward, tackling Varric to the ground. The two rolled across the cold metal floor, struggling for control. Varric snarled, his reptilian features twisting with anger. "You're ruining everything." Ethan pinned him down. "You tried to kill my child." Varric struggled, but Ethan delivered a hard punch to his jaw. The noble went limp, unconscious. Raylis arrived a moment later, breathing heavily. "Nice work." Ethan wiped sweat from his forehead. "Yeah, but we're not done yet." The Queen's judgment. Back at the palace, Varric was dragged before Queen Salvera. The grand hall was filled with nobles, soldiers, and citizens who had heard the news. Whispers spread like wildfire. Salvera sat on her throne, her expression cold and unreadable. "Varric," she said, her voice carrying through the chamber, "you have committed treason against the Sci-Fi Dominion." Varric, now bruised and restrained, sneered. "I did what was necessary." Ethan stepped forward. "You sent assassins after me. After your own queen. After our child." Gasps echoed through the hall. Some nobles still clung to tradition, but many looked horrified. Attacking a royal heir was unthinkable. Salvera's gaze hardened. "Your actions have disgraced our people." Varric chuckled bitterly. "And what will you do, Your Majesty? Execute me?" The Queen's eyes flashed. "No," she said. "I will do something far worse." She stood. "You will be exiled. Stripped of your titles, your wealth, your power. You will live among the outcasts, forgotten by history." Varric's eyes widened in horror. Exile was a fate worse than death. "No, you can't." Guards dragged him away before he could finish. Ethan watched as Varric disappeared. It was over. A new beginning. That night, Ethan stood on the palace balcony, looking over the city. For the first time, he felt safe. Salvera joined him, placing a hand on his shoulder. "You were brave today." Ethan chuckled. "Not brave, just stubborn." The Queen smiled, a very human trait. She touched her stomach, where their child was growing. "Our child will be strong." Ethan nodded. "Yeah, and I'll make sure they grow up in a world where they don't have to fight just to exist." Salvera looked at him, her silver eyes shining. "Together, we will build that future." As the stars twinkled above, Ethan knew this was just the beginning. The night was calm, but Ethan couldn't sleep. He stood by the palace window, watching the twin moons of Sci-Fi shine over the vast alien city. Everything should have felt peaceful. Varric was gone. The assassination attempt had failed, and Queen Salvera was safe. Yet something felt wrong. A soft voice broke his thoughts. "You're awake again," Salvera said, stepping beside him. Ethan exhaled. "I can't shake this feeling, like something is coming." The Queen rested a hand on her growing belly. "You have sharp instincts. Perhaps you are right." Before Ethan could respond, a loud alarm blared across the palace. The warning sirens. A royal guard rushed in, his expression grim. "Your Majesty, a fleet approaches the planet. Unidentified warships." Ethan and Salvera exchanged a look. The fight wasn't over yet. The enemy reveals itself. In the war room, a massive holographic screen displayed the enemy fleet. Dozens of dark, spiked warships hovered beyond Sci-Fi's atmosphere. General Kale, the Queen's military advisor, clenched his fists. "Those aren't pirates or smugglers. That is an invasion force." Ethan studied the ships. "Who are they?" Kale hesitated before answering. "The Xilarians, a rival empire that has wanted Sci-Fi's resources for years. They must have learned of recent palace conflicts and saw weakness." Ethan frowned. "They think now is the perfect time to strike." The Queen's expression remained calm, but her voice was firm. "Then we will show them that Sci-Fi is not weak." Preparing for war. The palace mobilized immediately. Warriors, battle droids, and planetary defenses activated. The entire city braced for battle. Ethan, now wearing a light combat suit given to him by the Queen, walked beside her as she gave orders. "You're really going to fight?" he asked. Vizalvera smirked. "I am a queen, Ethan, but I was a warrior before that." He grinned. "Now that's attractive." She raised an eyebrow. "Is this really the time?" He shrugged. "Gotta stay motivated." Before she could respond, a transmission interrupted. A hologram flickered to life. A Xilarian commander with sharp red eyes and thick armor appeared. "I am Lord Drax of the Xilarian Dominion. Surrender Zifar now, and we will spare your people." Vizalvera stepped forward, her silver eyes burning with defiance. "Zifar does not kneel." Drax smirked. "Then your planet will burn." The transmission cut off. The attack had begun. The battle for Zifar. Ethan stood on the palace balcony, watching as the sky erupted with fire. Zifar's planetary defenses blasted at the invading warships, while Xilarian drop pods rained down onto the streets. "Here they come," a guard shouted. The first wave of Xilarian soldiers landed in the city, armored figures charging forward with energy rifles blazing. Ethan grabbed a weapon from a fallen soldier and joined the fight. He fired, taking down one enemy before rolling behind cover. Raylis, the Queen's loyal guard, fought beside him. "Try not to die, human," she called out. Ethan grinned. No promises. Explosions shook the ground. Zifar warriors clashed with Xilarians in fierce, brutal combat. The city streets turned into a battlefield. But despite their strength, the Xilarians kept coming. They were too many. Ethan turned to Vizalvera. "We need to cut off their command. Take out Drax, and the rest might fall back." She nodded. "Then we take the fight to their leader." The final push. Vizalvera, Ethan, and a small strike team fought their way toward the enemy flagship. Using stolen Xilarian transport pods, they infiltrated the massive warship hovering above the city. The halls were dark and filled with enemy soldiers. Ethan moved fast, blasting enemies while Vizalvera cut through them with her energy blade. They reached the command center. Lord Drax stood waiting, his red eyes glowing. "You made a mistake coming here," Drax growled. Ethan smirked. "Funny, I was about to say the same thing." Drax charged. The final battle had begun. The air inside the enemy warship was thick with tension. The final battle had begun. Ethan gripped his weapon tightly as Lord Drax lunged at them, his energy blade cutting through the air. Vizalvera blocked his strike with her own blade, their weapons clashing in a shower of sparks. "You are strong, Queen," Drax growled, forcing her back. "But you will fall like the rest of your kind." Vizalvera smirked. "You talk too much." She struck back, swift and powerful. Their blades met again, the energy crackling as they fought in the center of the command room. Ethan fired at the Xilarian soldiers trying to protect Drax. He couldn't let them interfere. He dodged behind cover, shooting down one after another, but more kept coming. "Raylis," he called out. The Zifarian warrior spun through the air, her blades slicing down two enemies in a single motion. "Focus on Drax. We'll handle these." The turning point. Ethan turned back to the fight between Vizalvera and Drax. The Queen was holding her own, but Drax was relentless. His strikes became faster, more aggressive. Then he saw an opening. Drax overextended his attack, leaving his side open for just a second. "Vizalvera now," Ethan shouted. She reacted instantly, twisting her body and driving her blade deep into Drax's side. The Xilarian commander gasped, stumbling back. He clutched his wound, eyes burning with fury. "You dare?" Vizalvera stepped forward. "This is for my people." With a final swift motion, she struck again, finishing him. Drax collapsed, his weapon falling from his hand. The great Xilarian warlord was dead. For a brief moment, there was silence. Then, the Xilarian soldiers began retreating. Their leader was gone, and their invasion had failed. Victory and peace. Back on Scifi, the battle was over. The enemy forces withdrew, their warships fleeing into the stars. The people of Scifi emerged from their shelters, seeing their city still standing. Inside the palace, Ethan and Zalvera stood before the crowd of warriors and citizens. The queen raised her voice. "We have won." The crowd erupted in cheers. Scifi was safe. Ethan looked at Zalvera, smiling. "You were incredible." She turned to him, her silver eyes warm. "I could not have done it without you." Raylis smirked from nearby. "Maybe we should keep the human around." Ethan laughed. "I'm starting to like it here." A new beginning. Days later, peace returned to Scifi. The city was being rebuilt, and the people celebrated their victory. Ethan stood on the palace balcony with Zalvera, looking at the stars. "Are you staying?" she asked. He thought for a moment. Earth was his home. But here, he had found something more. "I think I belong here now," he said. "With you. With all of this." She placed a hand over her stomach, where their child grew. "Then you are truly one of us." Ethan smiled. He had come to Scifi as a stranger. Now he was family. As the twin moons shone over the city, he knew this was only the beginning of something greater. The end.